Hey guys, it's Ms. Gephardt, and we're going to go through and do the fossil notes. So make sure you have out your piece of paper and you are ready to take notes on the different types of fossils. And any questions that you come across as we go through these, please make sure you write them down so we can go over them in class. So we've got these various types of fossils. We've got some molds and casts, we've got trace fossils, we've got some carbon films, we have the original remains, we've got some petrified remains, and then we get some evidence from things like an ice core. So let's start off with how a fossil forms. So first off, in order for something to be fossilized, it's going to have to be preserved. So you have to imagine if I have Skippy the squirrel, so we all want to imagine Skippy. Skippy's skipping across the road. And as you all know, squirrels like to dart back and forth in the road. Well, every now and then a squirrel doesn't make it across the road and Skippy gets squished. Okay. If Skippy is left to sit in the road and decay, as gross as that might sound, it is going to be able to be eaten by predators or even just prey seekers, animals that need food, things like that. So it's going to be picked apart, body parts are going to be moved, it's going to be spread all over, okay? Not really going to be easy for fossilizing, but if Skippy were to die in, let's say, the desert, so it's hot and it's dry, and if it gets immediately covered over by sediment, that carcass is going to be better preserved. Okay, so the level of preservation is going to be dependent on what we can find out from it. If there are hard parts to the organism, so for example, like your skull, your bones, those are hard parts. This is squishy, soft stuff. This is not going to preserve, but your bones, that's going to preserve. So if there's hard parts, there's better likelihood of things like that. Think about think of like plants, like flowers, like a beautiful rose. The rose petals are not going to preserve as nicely as the seed would. Okay, so that's what's going to allow for fossilizing. We don't want any heat or magma from the earth, so you're not going to find fossils in things like igneous rock. You're going to find these fossils in things like sedimentary rock, because sedimentary rock, literally, it's just like layering it one on the other. We're not going to have it in anything that's got any kind of extreme heat, because that's going to destroy the fossil. All right, so types of fossils, we have the list, I already kind of went over them. We're going to break them down one by one and talk about them. So the first one is going to be original remains. This is the actual organism itself. So over to the left, you have amber, which is going to preserve usually small organisms like bugs. Sometimes you might get a bird, a small bird. You might see some small frogs in it. But basically, amber is like tree sap. So Mr. Birdie was landing on the tree limb, or the bug landed on the tree limb, and it got stuck by some sap and it couldn't move, and the sap overtook it. So you get the preservation of the entire thing. Ice is going to be the best preserver of animal parts, and so you can see we have full blown, all the soft part down to the hair, even to the stomach contents being preserved. And then tar is going to preserve a lot of those original remains. A lot of might not get the skin, but you're going to maybe get some, a little bit more than just the bones, but you might just get some bone structure from the organism. All right, next we have a mold and a cast. So I want you to think of a mold like a cake pan, okay? So an organism dies and it gets, let's say in the ocean, and it sets down at the bottom, okay? And the organism sits there, and it kind of gets, things come, it flows by or whatever, and the organism makes an impression in the sediment, and then that organism completely decays away, but it leaves the outline of itself. That's a mold, like a cake pan would be. And then over time, the mold is filled in with new sediment that hardens and makes a cast, which would be like a cake. Okay. That's just all, so it's not the actual organism, it's an impression of it. We have an impression, and then we fill the impression in and harden it up and get the cast. Both are going to provide evidence of, and you can see the real thing in the cast to the right, where this guy is the mold. So it's not the actual thing itself, but it is the outline and the features of it. Another one is a carbon film. Everything living is made up of carbon, and so when we die, we leave our carbon behind, and so this is leaving carbon on a rock. A lot of times you're going to see it with fish and plants. It almost looks like somebody drew on the rock itself. So if you look at that, that is the carbon left from that leaf, but it looks like someone was drawing all over it. So it's giving us details about the leaf. It shows us some of these features, but it's not the leaf itself. That leaf is long gone. Okay, trace fossils. Trace fossils are exactly what they sound like. They are traces of the organism's activity. So we have dinosaur footprints here. We can get a lot from a footprint. We can tell how high, how tall they were. We can tell their gait, which means how they walk. Did they walk? Did they run? Even based on their impression, you could almost gather a weight from them. So there's a lot of information you could get from just a footprint. These also are animal holes and burrows that they go into. We could have trails that go to a watering hole that may have potentially been there. So it's not the organism, but it's evidence of what the organism's life was like. All right, petrified remains are going to be, they're like a tree, for example. The cells in the tree over time have been replaced with sediment, a nice hard sediment, and that makes it feel like rock. So if I were to pick up this petrified wood right now, it would be feeling like a big giant rock, not wood itself. It wouldn't have that lightness that wood does. It would be extremely heavy because all of the cell parts have been replaced, all the cells, the softer part has been replaced with very hard sediment. What do they tell us? Well, they're going to tell us events in time. They tell us what's gone on. We look at all of these fossil evidence and these tracks, and we piece together a story of what the past looked like. Ice cores and tree rings, these are other pieces of information that give us clues that can tell us what happened then. So a tree ring, the rings of a tree, the thicker the ring, the more water that plant got, the thinner the ring, the less water. So if I have a tree that's full of a lot of really thin rings, I can imagine that it went through a very long period without water. So if there was a mass extinction of dinosaurs and that time period happened about the time that I find a plant that was really very thin rings, I might be able to put together that maybe they died because they didn't have any water and there wasn't any rain. Ice cores are going to hold things like dust and gas. So we can look at the atmospheric gas composition. Was it heavy in carbon dioxide? Was it heavy in nitrogen? So that also will play a factor in what the global temperatures were like. If there is a really big volcanic eruption, not only does the lava come out of the volcano, it sends ash into the air. So we could get ash trapped in ice, and that would tell us that there was a very large volcanic eruption. So it gives us information about the past, the climate, conditions that happened, and we take that past information with some of these animal information, and we can sort of knowing that past can sort of plan you for the future. If there's been a volcanic eruption every 10,000 years, we can kind of see, well, maybe there's one coming up in the next 1,000 years or something like that. Obviously, you all aren't going to be affected by it, but it is something that we would want to know. A little more specific on an ice core, this is what an ice core looks like. So they're literally drilling into the ice sheets and pulling up samples from it, and taking information, taking little slivers of information from these giant cylinders and looking at what gases are found in there and what percentage of gas is in there and if there's anything else that could potentially be trapped, because all this is doing is putting together a whole bunch of pieces to a puzzle to figure out what has gone on the planet. So remember, if you have any questions, please make sure you ask your teacher. These are all on fossil notes, so when we come into class, you should be ready and able to talk about the different types of fossils.